A very good evening. Happy New Year, if one is still allowed to say that. Good evening and welcome to the Kunsthistorisches Museum. My name is Jasper Sharp. I'm the curator here in the Museum for Modern and Contemporary Art. This is the first in a series of talks throughout this year as part of the Modern and Contemporary Art program, and it's a real treat to welcome Michaël Borremans. Michaël is one of the most interesting and acclaimed painters and draftsmen working today. He was born in Belgium in 1963, studied at St. Lucas in Ghent, graduated initially with a focus on etching and drawing, a little more. Later moved into painting, and he still lives and works in Ghent today. For the last 20 years, he's produced a fascinating body of work that moves between painting, paper, photography, sculpture, and film. And he has exhibited at museums all over the place. Many of you may have seen his work in Vienna a few years ago at the old BAWAG Foundation on the Franz-Josefs-Kai, 2012-2013. There was a very nice exhibition of paintings. Thank you very much for coming. It's a great pleasure to have you here. The plan for this evening is quite a simple one. It's a little bit of an experiment. Some of you may know a radio program called Desert Island Discs. It's a program which has been running for about 50 years in England, where interesting people choose a few pieces of music which mean something to them, and through these pieces of music, one learns about the person's life. And we're going to try and do a visual version of that game tonight. So we spent the day walking through a beautiful empty museum. The one lovely thing about Bruegel closing is that we get our Mondays back again. And we wandered the galleries today. We looked at a lot of objects in the morning, only objects. And then we looked at pictures in the afternoon in the galleries that we were allowed into where they weren't cleaning the floors. So the choice is also determined slightly by the floor cleaning schedule of the museum. And Michaël has selected 5 works for us to have a little conversation about, and I've folded some of his own works into this conversation. We'll see if it works. Yeah, so we'll just get straight into it. And I thought we could start with Bruegel because he's quite fresh in everybody's minds after this extraordinary exhibition that we just very sadly said goodbye to. This painting is actually called The Gloomy Day. The bulb in our projector is a bit too good. It doesn't look as gloomy here as it should. We actually saw it today with no light on it at all. And it was the gloomiest it's ever been. It's one of a series of 6 paintings of the seasons that Bruegel made that were commissioned by a merchant who lived just outside Antwerp for his dining room. 6 seasons because for many hundreds of years we talked about 6 seasons in the way that we now talk about 4 seasons. So there was early spring and late spring, and there was early summer and late summer. And we have 3 of these paintings. You know them all very well. We have this one, which is early spring. We have autumn and we have winter, which is the hunters in the snow. One of the most amazing things for me, having this Bruegel exhibition here, was the introduction of summer into this group. And for the first time, all of our pictures have a little bit of darkness to them. And for the first time, there was a burst of golden light. And I felt the sense of a season, actually the season changing properly for the first time. So it was a little difficult. We could have chosen any one of 12 paintings today. What was it that led you to this one in particular, of all the group? And let's maybe talk about when you came to see the Bruegel show a few weeks ago and the things that it triggered for you. Okay.
Good evening, everybody. First, it's an honor to be here, and the pleasure is all mine, Jasper. It's been a wonderful day in the museum today with you as a guide. It felt like a special treat, and I got to see so many things. That was a bit Foggy, yeah. But good. We selected some works to talk about, and of course, the Bruegel show. I really wanted to see it because it was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to see these works together. Because some works in this show will never travel again, so I've heard. And it was really hard to make a pick to start out with something. I have chosen The Gloomy Day because it has a very special sentiment for me. As you know, I live in the same country where Bruegel lived. And sometimes I recognize Bruegel in people, in the landscape, in atmospheres. And it's always a very special sensation when I experience this, because it's very strange. You know, you grow up, you get to learn art at first from reproductions in books, things like this. And even before you have seen the work in the flesh, it becomes part of your cultural background somehow, because you have seen it in very early age. And so these things form you as a child even, especially me, because I'm very well aware of it. And this one I like in particular because of the subject, The Gloomy Day. It's a kind of weather in Belgium we have sometimes, which most people just hate, because there's no wind, it's dark, it's boring. But these are days that I personally particularly enjoy.
It's a better light for painting with?
No, it's mostly too dark for painting even, so I should be very annoyed by it, but these are days that I cannot work, and then I go out and about in the woods and take a walk. And I enjoy this very much because I don't feel guilty that I'm not working. So I can really enjoy these days, and it has such a beautiful dark atmosphere. And this is something I would really miss if I would live in a sunny country, to have this change of seasons and this feeling that the light every day is different. And that's something we should be more aware of in Europe or in Western Europe. Our seasons and the change of the seasons is so beautiful, and we should valorize it a bit more, I think, instead of complaining about the weather.
I was speaking with someone the other day who told me that she follows summer all around the world, all year round. Yes. She lives in a perpetual summer.
Yeah.
And it was a particularly cold day, and I was briefly jealous. And then I had exactly the same sentiment as you, how horrible that would be. To never...
I understand it. I mean, some people don't like the winter, really don't like the cold, don't like the rain. And me, myself, if it rains for too long, I also get tired of it. But whenever there's a gloomy day, it makes me think of this painting also, and then I say, walking around in this painting, you know, it's a special sensation. And then you see what's happening. The peasants are cutting willow branches to make baskets or whatever. So they're just doing their usual work, and
they have waffles strapped to their heads. Waffles. There's a chap with a waffle strapped to his head, one of them somewhere. Okay. This guy...
Are you sure it's a waffle?
Somebody explained it to me, the origins of it. One thing you've talked about in here, and the reason I've chosen a slide which follows it, I could have chosen any number of slides of your work. This is a work from 2008 called Automat. It's interesting, it reminded me a little bit of the Clockwork dancer that we saw downstairs in the Kunstkammer today, the gypsy guitarist. There's one thing that I take from those amazing landscapes of Bruegel is that incredible sense of atmosphere he creates, and a sort of melancholy and an anxiety. There's an anxiety in a lot of the paintings. Obviously, some of them are depictions of hellish situations, and they go beyond anxiety. But even in a painting like the one we saw, of people going about their normal business, but with the storm and the wavy sea. I'm interested in your own relationship with the atmosphere. I feel as if there are certain detectable moods in different series of your works. I feel that it's got even more dark in the last couple of series of works. You've also spoken that maybe you were a little too subtle in your expression of atmosphere in some of your early works, and maybe people didn't read the anxiety into them that you wanted them to.
Yeah, that was sometimes I felt in the reactions or the appreciation even you get for works that it's the wrong kind of appreciation. So that people appreciate it for, in my point of view, the wrong reasons, because it's beautifully painted or whatever. Because for me, there's a whole series of other things going on in the paintings that are for me much more interesting. But to come back to Bruegel, I have to say he's such an amazing painter because, and I do quite the opposite, but he can make such a complex compositions that they never fall apart. They're very strong, and that's very difficult to do. It's like cinematographic mastery in a painting, and I have to say I feel very small when I see this. You know, this is so strong. This is the work has so many great qualities that it's really flabbergasting.
I was being told by someone in the exhibition when I was visiting that one of his great friends was a map maker, a cartographer, who taught him how to lay out huge amounts of information and make it, each element of it, visually readable, leaving just enough oxygen around his situations so that they don't fight with each other, but they still a huge density. Because that amount of information in someone else's hands would become a mess. But he manages to keep.
It must be very hard to do what he did, you know, and also he made this large sceneries with a lot of things going on, and the subject is one of these things. It's indeed covered with all other events, like the Icarus painting. You see him drowning, but it's just a small element in this big world he paints, and that's fascinating.
I think it's also interesting how what many of us don't. An extraordinary thing that many of us don't realize when we see these paintings today is these were some of the very first paintings in which the landscape was the protagonist. The main feature of the painting was the landscape. The landscape had always been there behind the Virgin's shoulder, behind baby Jesus, a bit of Tuscany, a bit of Umbria, and here suddenly the landscape, and he imbues it with a personality every time. Each landscape has a wonderful character to it.
And most of the landscapes are like sampled images. I mean, the foreground is always very Flemish, very familiar, and then in the background it becomes more exotic, more Italian mountains, but that's of course invented. But it's based on his travels at early age. And for me, his work is also very interesting because on a socio-historical and anthropological side, it tells a lot of the way people lived back then in Flanders, and I think it must be at some points very, very accurate, and that's also very fascinating to see.
I've put in a couple of paintings of yours. Yes. This is a painting called 10 and 11 from 2006, and one of my real favorites of yours, the painting called Dead Chicken from 2013. Can you talk a little bit about, maybe with just at the beginning of this conversation, a little bit about your relationship with historical painting? Is it something that you were taken to see as a child, whether by your family or with school? Is it a relationship that you enjoyed from the beginning, or is it something you came to a little later? The type of things we were looking at today?
Yeah, these things came a little later. The first paintings I was confronted with was Jan van Eyck, the Flemish primitives, which as a child I found fascinating and grueling and scary as well, just as the whole Catholic theater, because I grew up in a very Roman Catholic family, and I saw a lot of chapels as a child that were enlightened by candles at night, and I thought it was very scary. I even crossed the road just not to be close to it because it freaked me out in a way. But on the other hand, I was fascinated by it. And then these paintings the religious paintings of Van Eyck and so on had the same effect on me. So in a way, it was part of my formation, as my becoming, my visual world, and my becoming as an artist as a young child. And later on, I was looking for art myself, of course, and I grew some preferences. And one of these preferences, one of the first things I saw also in books and reproductions was Caravaggio, and he was standing out of other paintings just because of his the way he depicted sceneries, and he used these strange angles, and it was very much like modern photography or film. And
he's our next one.
Yeah. But me myself, this thing for instance, this is very much inspired. Not inspired, but I am very well of some analogies with certain classical themes in painting, like some hunting game that's still lifes, or a dead hare, but also the work of Chardin. Here, for me, it was important to try to have this similar atmosphere, because Chardin depicts very, very closed worlds. Even his still lives is like a world, just like in Bruegel, but it's much smaller. And that's also much more my approach, or it's much more in my character to make the subject or the painting or the composition very, very minimal. It's also possible to make an atmosphere in that way. And the more information I give in a painting, the more disturbance I get, And here I paint a very simple chicken, nothing fancy about it, and I never know exactly, or a lot of times I don't know exactly why I pick out. Like this, for instance, I just knew, I have to paint a chicken. That's that. I had to kill it.
I was going to say the source was an actual. You painted this from life.
It died for this painting. Yeah. It was a sad day, the day that I did it.
Just before we leave Bruegel, you said something very interesting to me today, that you had been not finding a great deal of enthusiasm in recent months and years for making drawings. And seeing the Bruegel exhibition and seeing his drawings reawakened your interest in...
Yeah, it reminded me there was actually a draftsman. And I've been drawing for a long time before I became a painter, because I only started painting when I was 35. And I did my drawings with great enthusiasm. And then I started painting, and I neglected my drawing. And I tried to pick it up again, and the feeling didn't... I mean, technically I could work, but I didn't have the Begeisterung, as you say in German, that was there, and that's necessary to have this in order to make interesting work. So I tried from time to time and didn't come back. And now with this Bruegel show, now I'm drawing all the time like crazy. And I think it has something to do with the Bruegel show. Because Bruegel was, in the first place, an excellent, extraordinary also draftsman. Because I even think his paintings, they started out as drawings. Because it's very, very detailed and very narrative, everything, and then he started coloring it in.
That was the beautiful thing about the research project, being able to look beneath the paint at the underdrawing. We were talking a little bit today. I had the privilege of walking through the exhibition with a lot of different artists, and I was shocked by the number of artists that told me that they didn't think he was a good draftsman. And I was speechless every time, because if the Tower of Babel had remained a charcoal drawing and had never been painted, it would still be a masterpiece, I think. So, yeah. But a lot of people said, no, you can't really draw, and I utterly disagree. But
I don't understand. Yeah. It's incomprehensible to me.
And talk about the role of drawing in your work a little bit. Are there times when it has a purely preparatory function for you? Are there times when it follows a painting where you feel you've still got another twist of a subject that you find need to get out? Or where does it sit? I mean, do you have any form of hierarchy of your own work within your mind in relation to paper and painting?
Yes, well, in recent years when I didn't do much drawing, I did make a drawing from time to time. But I never, and even before, I never made drawings as a study before making a painting. But on some occasions, drawings came about. Maybe we can go back to this first painting, the first painting I did.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, because that's a good example. Yes. Actually, you were talking of automats or automatons. Actually, I'm also experimenting on the side with some sculpture, but mostly these things fail. But this was actually an automaton that I got made. And this automaton was not so good. It looked a bit hideous, and I thought I could not use it, but I used it as a model for a series of little paintings. And the first work I made was a small drawing, crazy enough, very small drawing, which was called Drawing, and this was the subject. And then I wanted to make a painting, but I felt that it had to move. And then I got this automaton made by someone, but I was not happy with the result. And then we made a film with a real girl that played an automaton. So the video exists. The video is quite good. I was happy with that. And later on, I made some paintings with the clothing the girl was wearing in the film.
Is the neck also from her? No.
No. But it's from the same period of time when I did some small little films. And these were made afterwards on the basis of the failed automaton.
And when you say you had something made, you did a sketch and...
Well, it was in collaboration. I got someone who made mannequins, puppets for étalage, for clothing. He worked in a factory like this, and in his free time he helped me doing this, so we made it together with a motor inside and everything. And with real hair even. I wanted real hair, and we ordered real hair. This is a nice anecdote. And you can get real hair, and it's very expensive when it's long. But it's supposed to be a young girl, and we got hair from an old Chinese lady. So it didn't fit.
Can you order a certain type of hair?
Well, I didn't know. I didn't know. Yeah, I think you can order younger hair, yeah. But I didn't know that back then. So we had the wrong hair.
My mother used to order human hair because we had deer coming into our garden and eating all the vegetables. And if you put a little bit of human hair on your vegetables, the deer will leave them alone. Okay. But she would get it from a hairdresser. Oh, yeah. So she got short. It wouldn't have worked here.
The same problem. I have a studio in the country, and me and my sister, we are growing. We have a little vegetable garden, and it's not deers. They're a bit smaller. They're small deers.
Small deer.
And And they come to eat stuff there too. Yeah.
My uncle, once his vegetables were eaten by slugs.
Yeah.
And he put up a sign.
No, snake.
No, it was really interesting. He's a hippie. He's a Quaker.
Yeah.
He's a Quaker. And Quakers have very particular ways of doing things. And he put up a sign saying, slugs, this bit of the garden is for you.
Yeah.
You can eat as much as you like with an arrow pointing this way. This way is mine. Yeah. Eat there, don't eat there.
Yeah.
He swears that it worked. A painted sign. He tells me...
They can read.
They can read a long way up as well, in English. Anyway,
I will remember it.
We're digressing. One thing you said about drawing, I read a little interview when I was thinking about what we could talk about tonight, and you said one thing which really stood out for me because I totally disagreed with it, and I thought I have to ask you about it tonight. You said, and interviews are awful things because we quote them back to you and then you wish we never did, but you once said that you felt that a drawing would never be able to match the power of a painted image. It will never be able to deliver the visual punch that a painting can. Is that something that you...
That's why I started painting. I wanted to be more visible as an artist, and apparently it worked.
Okay, that's a good answer.
So there's some proof. But what I mean is that a painting is much more of a statement when you show it, I feel, psychologically.
Is this connected to physical size? Is it connected to color?
It's connected with our cultural history, I think. Subconsciously, we give painting a certain, a greater respect or a greater stage. We think it's more important because of how it has developed in our history. And for good reasons, I think, because painting, for me, it's an ultimate medium, and it can never die. Some ways or some purposes for painting can get lost, of course, like portraiture and all documentary purposes for painting are, of course, less interesting today. But every age, and especially every artist, can find himself in this medium and be unique. I'm totally convinced of that, and can make original work. And what I like about what the thing about painting is that it's so physical. It's just physical material that you put on a canvas or something else by hand, and you don't have to be technically good in order to make a good work. Because I know a lot of people that can paint so good technically, and they make bad paintings. And there's people who are very clumsy that make very good paintings, good art. So there's no rules. It's like playing guitar. Everybody can find his way on it, less or more.
I would say that there's a couple of artists whose paintings do very little for me at all, whose drawings, I find it... We were talking about Raphael today, that we both struggle a little bit with Raphael as a painter. Yes. But as a draftsman, his drawings... Rubens is another one. I'm going to hold up my hand and say that I'm not a massive Rubens fan. Rubens with pastel in his hand. I understand, and I believe we all, whether we want it or not, we do have a certain hierarchy in our mind where painting perhaps sits in a position above...
You even see it on the market.
Yeah, but the market, I mean, they would say that women don't make good art if you pay attention to the market, you know, so the market is a funny thing.
Yeah, but women in art is, I mean, the way women are more equal now than before, it's a recent phenomenon. Sure. And most work on the market is old. Or, you know, so we have to evaluate that in 50 years, maybe. Yeah. If it's not okay, then then it's not okay, of course. Yeah.
So we're going to move on to our next painting, and this painter, who you will know, Caravaggio, who will be the subject of a wonderful exhibition opening here in October, Caravaggio and Bernini. This is a well-known story from the Bible of just before the Christ is crucified, his captors place a crown of thorns on his head and twist it to tighten it up. And they do it both to cause him severe pain and also to mock his claim of authority by hurting him with a crown. You talked a little bit about Caravaggio earlier. When you first came across this, it was something that you immediately gravitated towards?
Yes, Caravaggio had this effect on me. It was the first painting I saw on reproduction. Was the reconversion of St. Paul and the low camera point of view and everything. And it is said that he used optics or mirrors. And but good. Maybe that's how it came about, because of the placement of these instruments he used. But I don't mind how it came about. But he came up with a very new and modern way to depict the same classical themes. I mean, a lot of painters throughout history, they all painted the same themes, a lot of religious themes and other themes. And it's very funny, some compositions are even almost the same, like a lot of Madonna paintings, things like that. And it's very strange that in the case of one artist, it stands out, and the other artist, even though very well painted, it doesn't. And that's the magic a good artist has. And it's a gift, and it's not something you can learn, I think. And he had it, definitely, in a very powerful way.
And I think I don't know a great deal about the fortunes of Caravaggio's career over the last several hundred years, but I imagine the moment that photography and film were more fully integrated into our daily lives, his achievement became even more remarkable to modern eyes. Yeah. I wonder how someone in the early 19th century, obviously his pictures look different even to his contemporaries, and he started a whole thing, but I think the moment certain modern technologies became part of day-to-day life, one was fully able to see how crazily...
Some film directors claim that they were very much inspired by Caravaggio in the way they depict.
One thing that I've always loved in his works, and it's something I want to again pick up a little bit in your works, is this sense of a very deliberate staging. Caravaggio's works often have that. You feel as if there's a huge crew of people behind you with lights and makeup, and there's a whole sort of set. And you've made a number of work. This is a work from 2015 from the Black Mold, and then also the most recent series of works, Fire from the Sun, from 2017, which you showed in Hong Kong at the beginning of year before last year. They have a very deliberate mise en scène, theatricality. They also have a different temperature to your other work. The temperature is turned up quite substantially. Can you talk a little bit about this theatricality, this sense of, because it brings a sense of artifice to it.
Yeah, but it's something that's always been a concern of mine, to make sure in the paintings that I would be very clear that I'm not after nature, painting after nature. That I'm seeking to represent the culture itself. I started out painting the puppets or representations of the human figure as a subject already. So it's early paintings were already representations of representations, and I like this delay it gives because it gives a psychological distance to your subject, because it's the basic of your subject. It gets really far away, and it tells more about the way we represent ourselves. And I tried to do this in many different ways. And in the Black Mold series, in the Fire of the Sun, I deliberately made a blank stage, which is actually a big canvas that I used.
So yeah, talk about how you actually made. What's the setup in your studio?
Yeah, it was. I had a canvas, unprepared linen canvas, up in the studio, and I had, in this case. Children of friends were invited with their parents to play around, because they were too young to direct, take this pose or this, or stand there. No, they're too young. They were just running around, and I took some pictures. Later in the paintings, I started to sample them. This little child here, and this one here, and that was a lot of fun. But that's very...
So working from the photographs that you took?
Yeah. And in the Black Mold series, it was all the same model that was just dancing on punk music, and I took pictures.
And I mean, the logical extension of this is then, if we're talking about Caravaggio and the sort of almost photographic and filmic, is your own work in film. This is a work called The Bread from 2012. Am I right in thinking it was made originally for a church? Or
yes, it was kind of commissioned. Not really. I was invited to join a show which was happening in the cathedral in Ghent, and so it inspired me to make this and to place it in a side chapel on an altar. But it came about it came about very, very accidentally. Because I was planning to make, with this girl in this setting, a totally different movie. And we were taking a break, and the mother of the girl was there, and she presented her pieces of bread to eat, because she couldn't come out of the device. And I saw the beauty of it, and I saw all the analogies it had with Catholic religion, and
you were trying to make a film for the cathedral.
Yeah, but the idea was to do something different with digital intervention, digital animation on top of it. But I never did it because I saw her eating bread, and I said, this is much more interesting and so much more simple. And so I asked the cameraman, "Can you please film this? Just go on eating bread, girl," I said. But because bread is the body of Christ, and she's a virgin eating it. And how strange that this happens, I thought.
And is it too kind of cute to say that you find yourself turning to film when you feel that sculpture can't give you what you need, and you find yourself turning to sculpture when painting can't give you what you need?
I think that's how it works. It comes out of frustration that sometimes in painting I miss them. Sometimes I need an element of movement. A lot of my drawing is about sculptural proposals that are impossible to create in reality, that are beyond these physical boundaries and physical boundaries. So you can, in a drawing, you can do proposals for huge and crazy things. Everything that still fascinates me about the drawing. You just need a piece of paper and a simple pencil, and you can be wherever you are, and you create something. It's not real. It doesn't have to be real, because everything you can think of is true in a way. So you can communicate ideas and with the most simple means, and that is still more fascinating to me than whatever technical development we get. I mean, you don't need all these things. Of course, technical innovation goes on. You cannot stop it, and it's important, and it's necessary in a way, and it's inevitable. But we still have to remember the basics, how important they are and how valuable.
And do you enjoy to combine the different media when you're showing your own work in exhibitions? I mean, I don't.
Not always. No. Sometimes I do. Sometimes it's relevant to do it. And when I'm invited for shows, mostly they want me to do it. But sometimes I think I'm also purely a painter in some perspective, and then I want to show only paintings with no disturbance whatsoever. But lately, last year, I did a show which was experimental to me in the Sydney Biennial in Australia, and where I showed a lot of unfinished work and gave it a very documentary, didactical feel, where I showed my source material, scale models I made, failed stuff, together with films and drawings.
How was it?
And it worked out very well. It was very, very adventurous, but especially because it was not, it had an unfinished feel. It was like you were in my studio, although everything was displayed in vitrines. But it was very correct in a way. It felt like this is the most correct way to show my work, maybe. Just show the stuff I'm doing.
I remember years ago, the Fondazione Prada in Venice showed one of Thomas Demann's models that he had created a series of, I think it was a cave. And I remember thinking when I saw it, I shouldn't be looking at this, because it was the bit that he never shows. Yeah. But actually it was utterly fascinating. But it was purely... A lot of your films, I haven't seen enough of your films, but the ones I have seen, I always feel that they have a sort of looped quality to them. Is that something that you find yourself...
Yes, I want to try to make them as short as possible. And
how long is this piece, for example?
There's 1 minute, I think.
1 minute.
I don't know, maybe that's... No, this is a bit more... No, there's 5 minutes. But her movements are very simple and similar.
Repetitive.
Yeah. So I wanted to make it just long enough that the repetition is not disturbing too much. I lost my thread.
When you work in a media like sculpture or film, does it represent something of a pause for you? A welcome sort of, is it a change of intensity in your working process that you just leave the painting for some time? Does it represent like Lucian Freud used to paint his garden once a year, and he described it as going on holiday. Yeah, because he didn't have to deal with a person or...
No, it doesn't have this function for me. Making a film is really a bugger. I mean, sometimes I have to do it because this work I couldn't do in another way, so I have to do it, and then you have to hire people and organize it. And it's not my preparation to do this. I prefer to be alone in my studio. Also, but because sometimes you need to do it. But
you also have a dependency on
fun.
other people.
What?
When you suddenly have a dependency on other people as well.
Absolutely.
When you're working on this, which must be agonizing.
But it's a whole organization. You need a film crew to do this, and you need a lot. Even I try to keep it as minimal as possible, but you need someone for the clothing, someone for this, for the place was cold, it need to be heated. You need a lot of things, you know.
So we're going to move on to the next painting, and this is probably the one artist that if I had to put some money this morning on an artist that you were going to choose, I had a feeling that Velázquez would be that one. This is one of a series of portraits of the Infanta Margarita Teresa. This is called Infanta Margarita Teresa in a blue gown. by Velázquez from 1659. It's one of the very, very, very last paintings Velázquez made before he died. He died in 1660. She's 8 years old here. The paintings are being made in Spain and sent to Vienna to her future husband, who was also her uncle in traditional Habsburg style. And she marries him, I think, about 9 years later. And again, this was it was difficult to choose one of these paintings over the others, but we chose this one. He seemed to be the one artist today where I sensed, when you're walking around, a genuine awe about what he's able to do, sometimes with very little, sometimes with quite a lot. But you were sort of genuinely amazed at certain devices in his work when we were looking at them today.
Yeah, I like his efficiency. Mostly he works with very little means to create a maximum effect. And the way he does it is like dancing. It seems so easy. And there's a musicality in it, and a lightness, and you just cannot stop looking at it. It's not only the subject; it's very modern in a way, and if you look at it in an abstract way, it's also super enjoyable. It just doesn't stop.
It's funny what you're doing, because what I can never stand still when I'm in the Velázquez room. The paintings make me come in, and when I'm in, they make me go back, and when I'm back, I want to come in again, and I find myself kind of literally kind of dancing back and forth between the paintings.
And I told you today, what I would prefer to do is stay a week in that room, have a little bed, not come out for a week, to see if I really want to get out of that room after a week, because it breaks my heart each time when I'm in this museum I have to leave this room. It's always like, oh, I have to say goodbye. So, but I'm really a lover of painting, of course. There's no other medium that moves me this much, I have to say it.
He's also someone you look at, and I mean, there's a pretty direct line one can trace in terms of the way you paint. If you're looking at Velázquez, you're looking at Goya, you're looking at Chardin, Manet. They're people for whom painting, I mean, firstly, they're in love with the material of paint itself, but they're people who look like they had enormous fun in their painting.
Yes, but looks can be deceiving.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to ask you. I mean, how many of your paintings are terrible struggles? Because
some are.
Okay.
I will not tell you which ones, but if you look with certain attention, you can tell. The paintings that look light and quickly painted, like the dead chicken, that was a lot of fun. I made it in 2 hours.
Like which one?
Like the dead chicken, for instance. But then I made most of the. That's how I try to work, light-footed. Dancing. No, and when I don't make one mistake in the process from start to end, then I make a very good painting, and then it goes very quickly. But sometimes I work for weeks on the same painting and I don't get it right.
How often do you have a complete dead end and something just never leaves the studio?
A lot, really a lot. The last couple of years, less, because I learn, but there were years that on 5 paintings I had to throw away three, like 2 and 5, and that was I was happy with that. I mean, it's normal that you cannot be content or happy with everything you make. But now, but what I do now, that's what I learned. When I see in the process that goes wrong, I stop and I don't try to.
Don't try to correct it.
I just give up. you know?
I'm writing
And
about...
I start a new one. And that way I work in a more efficient, I think.
I'm writing about a famous self-portrait by Lucian Freud at the moment, where he's naked at the age of 70. And he did the face about 12 times. Yeah. He said the first time he did it, he just had his father. So he very quickly painted over. But he did it 12 times, so the paint is literally sort of... It's like a sculpture on the face. But he would keep going. He would put his foot through things often as well, but he...
Do in my younger years, I've physically attacked paintings, yeah. But that, not anymore. When I was young and angry, I'm still angry, but I'm a bit wiser now.
Just...
Once I threw in an axe, like to cut wood, to painting, and it bumped back, and I had to do like this.
Was the painting attacking you?
The painting fought back.
So,
yes.
I mean, we have a lot of young artists in the studio tonight. You now are in the fortunate position where you work with some wonderful galleries. Your galleries do dozens and dozens of art fairs and exhibitions. To what extent do you still have the luxury to paint a work and allow it to sit and stay and keep you company in the studio and either inform the next paintings or to give you time to work out if it's worked? How long do you have? Is there a... I imagine that, you know, for certain people whose work is in demand, that time you get to spend with works is getting shorter and shorter and shorter. Or are you happy just for something to leave the studio when you're done with it and you're already on to the next thing? Or...
Well, that is a struggle sometimes, and it's something also I have to learn in time, because I can demand time with my work as long as I need. I'm in the position that I can decide, and although the galleries will try to influence me, otherwise, like they will forget about you. Things like that.
Such an awful thing to say.
yeah. You have to be present, you know, and art fairs are important, and they're horrible places because they're like a real fair. Every art screaming for attention. It's the worst place to show art in my opinion. But of course, it's important because everybody goes there, and a lot of deals are made, and a lot of networking goes on. But luckily, I don't have to go there. But a lot of art, good art, needs peace and silence and a room of its own. And that's all these things you never get on art fairs. And that's a real pity. So they should rethink the concept. And I mean, we have these art fairs and we have biennials and things like that, and the quality is very, very uneven. And all these things we should try to improve them, to improve these concepts in order to have a better quality of art, and not like Venice is a lot of quantity, but you really have to search to look for something good, and maybe maximum, and I'm very optimistic, 10% is interesting. You see so much junk everywhere.
I felt like I spent the first... So this year is exactly 20 years since I started working in museums. And I feel like over those 20 years, I've developed a filter, a visual filter. So I will walk into a room and can quickly scan it. And I know, okay, I need to take a closer look at that. It's okay not to look at those things. At the beginning, I would look at everything, and I was exhausted and overwhelmed. Now I can walk in. When I'm at an art fair, this filter explodes. And I find myself staring at absolute crap and walking past the beautiful objects. The whole thing just goes up in smoke. It's dreadful.
Makes you blind.
Makes you blind. Yeah. It's dreadful.
And I would also... Yeah, we talked about it earlier today. So shows with a small amount of works, like 12 to 15 works, that's more than enough if they're good works. Yeah. That's what we need to do more, like compact, high quality shows.
So I was trying to put some of your paintings together with Velázquez, and at the beginning I started to put together all the beautiful skirts that I could find, which seemed to be a bit ridiculous. What I actually came to are these works of yours, which I really love. This is called Apparatus 2, and this is Apparatus. And when I first saw these, it's a little too yellow on the screen, but no?
It's better on the screen.
It's better on the screen?
On the screen
it's
than
better
on the
screen.
monitor.
Okay,
yeah.
It's better on the screen. So we should look this way. They remind me quite a lot of, I don't know if you know the very early paintings of Via Selmans, where she painted the things in her studio, her heater, her telephone, and she was exactly looking at Velázquez. Spanish still lives as well when I was doing these. For some reason, these, even though unusually for your work, we can kind of date these works a little bit. They're certainly not from 400 years ago.
No.
They feel as if they're from the modern age, but they have something wonderfully old masterly in their treatment and the light and also, again, the kind of mise en scène to them. So anyway, what is you talked today about an interest in bringing together all your
yeah, all works were
with no people.
No people, no animals, nothing alive. All cultivated things, objects, not even plants. For a couple of years I had this idea to bring these kind of works together, because it would throw a totally different light on my oeuvre. It would look like from a different artist, maybe. It's an experiment I want to do. Maybe I have to do it in a small publication, a book.
But I feel that in a way you also treat these as they have a portrait quality to them, in a way, or at least you're not treating them hugely differently than a portrait in terms of the setting and the.
Yeah, it's exactly the same backdrop as the children.
Yeah. Okay, we're going to go on to this painting. Correggio. We're going to stay on this one very briefly, but we both agreed it's one of our favorite paintings. You have this in your bathroom.
Yes, I have a postcard of it. I see it every day.
And we were talking about how ambiguous it is, because if you read the original story of this scene, this is Io, the girl, and she...
The beautiful nymph.
The beautiful nymph. And she runs away from Jupiter, who wants to seduce her. And Jupiter transforms himself into this black cloud and rapes her. It's a scene of rape in Ovid, in the Metamorphoses. And yet, this has a different... You described it as the tenderest of loves today. That's the feel you get from it.
The work has a lot of qualities. One of the major qualities the work has, in my opinion, is that the artist is able to depict a certain sense, a certain feeling you have, an erotic sentiment, which is very delicate, which is impossible to paint, yet he achieves to do it. And this is something I cannot really grasp, but it's tender, but it's still strong. It's not soft. The way the cloud grabs the woman is very resolute, very, how would I say, without any doubt. And the woman undergoes it, but in her face you see it's kind of willingly.
There's no resistance. It doesn't appear to be any resistance.
She's not fighting. So that's one thing. And on the other hand, it's such a good painting in every single aspect. The one thing I don't like is the very long vertical format. That's something that's not really my thing. But the background here, it's not so clear. It's very dark, the background, and and then you see the leaves, the green leaves on the back. You have to look at the real painting, of course. And but the way it is rendered, the way everything is painted, is of such mastery. I cannot come close to that, and I don't have the ambition. It's no use. But
you said something interesting about this painting. It's one of 4 paintings of Jupiter in his different forms. So the swan, the eagle.
He changed himself in all kinds of things.
The shower of gold coins.
In order to seduce other women.
We all do it. Maybe not into black clouds, but we've all tried it, I should say. It was one of 4 paintings painted for the Palazzo Te in Mantova. We have 2 of them now, and the other ones I think are in Berlin, Dresden. But you said you find it a work that needs no companions. You said today...
Yeah, it's so perfect.
You said you would build a house.
Yes.
For this painting.
Yes. This painting, that would be ideal, to have a house for the painting. With no other artwork in the house, only this one, and that the house is built around it, and for this painting. And and it should be a very minimalistic, modern house. And to have only this painting in it would be...
I love the format. I think the format is so interesting.
And people could visit it, maybe. Like a pavilion for the painting could work. But I would like to have a private house where you can sit on the sofa and watch the painting.
When Mark Rothko came to Europe, one of his favorite places was San Marco in Florence, where Fra Angelico did one painting in each of the monks' rooms. And he came out of that and just said, it is the greatest way to see art. We just need lots of small spaces all over the world with single pieces in them. Yeah. And he kind of achieved it with the chapel. It's admittedly more pieces, but he was looking for this sort of singularity. And we were talking today about a Chardin exhibition that we both saw a few years ago in England at the home of Jacob Rothschild. And it was an exhibition of 8 paintings. And it's still, to this day, the greatest exhibition I've ever seen in my life, and I think an important one for you as well. I followed this up with a couple of paintings of yours. This is the Virgin from 2013, and the Wooden Skirt from 2011, painting of yours I really love, which also has a related series of works to it. I'm just going to put this one up. This was our 5th and final picture we chose today. It's one everybody knows. It's one we couldn't actually look at today because its floor was being cleaned. It's probably the most complicated of all of the pictures we've looked at today. As a non-painter, to me it feels like the most complicated in its construction.
Very complicated. Yeah.
I mean, it's a remarkable work in many different ways. It's a self-portrait, which a lot of people don't immediately
assume to be a
self-portrait. Yeah? It was called The Artist in His Studio for many years, and now we call it, its title is The Art of Painting, which is a rather self-confident title. One thing that I find very interesting in this work, when we compare it to your work, is in making this painting, Vermeer exactly places his situation. You can tell where you are. There's even a map on the wall of the Netherlands. So he anchors the painting geographically, and then through the fabrics, the fashion, everything, you can also anchor it completely in time. So you can identify, if you know a little bit about cultural history and geography, you can identify exactly when this was made. He wants you to know when this was made and where it was made. There are all sorts of little signposts in there to help you identify. And I feel that a recurrent theme of your work is the total opposite. I look at a number of most of your paintings, and they have what appears to be a very deliberate timelessness to them. I've put a couple of pieces in here. This is a painting, an old painting from 2003 called One, and a slightly younger painting called Sleeper. You deliberately strip away, in a lot of the works, anything that gives us a sort of foothold in where are we?
Everything that gives a reference or information, I deliberately take that away.
Is that something that you picked up? I mean, it seems it's something you picked up really quite early.
Yes, but it was. I realized the more information I had in the painting, the more it disturbed me. So I took as much as I could away and just painting the subject. Because in this particular painting, I even painted her shirt, but then I took it off again because it was too much information.
What's really interesting?
These are very intuitive decisions in the process, but I find out that I don't want to make paintings that document our times. I want to document the human condition or a way of viewing, but not things that details, cars, clothing, telephone, watch. These things are getting in the way of what I'm really trying to say, because they disturb in that monologue.
What's interesting about it is, if you take Cézanne's bathers, what's so remarkable about them is that the bathers could have literally been painted any time from ancient Greece to today.
Yeah.
And it makes them very modern as paintings. When I see you doing the same thing, it also immediately sets up a dialogue with, in the other direction as well.
That's done deliberately, because for me it's very important to have this implicit dialogue with the history of painting in some way. Because you're part of a tradition. And I mean, we talked about paintings in Pompeii or in Herculaneum. They seem very modern too. For myself, I refuse to see art in a timeline. For me, a work of Richard Serra or Donald Judd is just as important and influencing as a work by Roger van der Weyden or even older, or work by Da Vinci. These things are all present today and have just an equal amount of influence, or they're just there. When you're in this museum, you experience it. And for me, a lot of contemporary art gives the impression that it's part of an evolution. It should be part of an evolution, but I don't believe in that way of thinking. I'm a child of my time, and in my time we see a lot of different things, and not only art. We see nature and the cosmos, and I mean, and you pick out of it what you want, and you digest it, and things come out of you.
I think we're going to sort of wrap this up now. I think
once we start talking about the cosmos.
Yeah, exactly. When we get to blood moons and wolf moons, I think when I look at an artist's work and I'm trying to work out, when I'm processing it, one thing I do find myself looking for is an awareness of what has come before, without it being a stranglehold, an understanding of it. I'm fascinated by artists' relation with tradition, because tradition is very often used as a kind of dirty word when you describe something as traditional.
But mostly it's in the wrong. way. In this case, now I have to defend myself.
Yeah.
What do we see? We see the head of a child. We have no information about the context. That's a very conceptual, modern approach. We don't know, is the child asleep or is it dead? There's a very strong influence from photography, forensic photography, or from film. From film we have the framing, and we have the information that's outside of the framing. And that's a totally different way of using an image or depicting something than we had 200 years ago. Today we see the world also with a different angle. Psychologically, we ourselves, because of the media we use. And therefore, this work is terribly contemporary. But I like the dialogue with the past as well. And this is something you see in the language of the paint. And it's a language we all understand. It's not a dead language. Yeah. It's not like Latin. It's still a very appealing language.
What I was trying to say is I think your a really remarkable achievement is that I perceive in your work is you have understood the basic building blocks of certain traditions, technical, philosophical, whatever they might be, and you've also understood maybe where the peripheries of that tradition currently situate themselves. And it doesn't happen very often in every generation of artists, but there are certain people who just take the established periphery of a tradition and just give it a nudge and push it out and broaden what we understand that tradition to be. And I feel that that's something that you manage to do with your work. It feels as if it is part of, even if you don't think of a particular continuum, it feels as if it has natural bedfellows through the history of art, but that you're not simply mimicking certain things, you're drawing on them, but then you're pushing the boundary out a little bit for the next people then to work with somehow. I mean, maybe that's a very simplistic way of thinking about it, but stretching what is possible within a certain language.
It might be, but that's not for me to judge. But on the other hand, I get the critic. Why don't you use contemporary media? Because I use contemporary media from time to time. I use the film and things like that. But painting is a medium that is indestructible. I mean, if you use a modern media, whatever digital media, it will be outdated in 10 years. This will remain because it's a painting. And what I try to do works best in painting. I can do this with photograph, but it will never have the same result. It will never have this gravity. It has this
Humanity?
Gravity. I mean, because it's painting, and painting is so rooted in our history that for me it needs to be painting.
It's very nice to hear such a strong defense of painting. I'm also a believer that painting will never
it will have ups and downs.
It has, certainly. And it always will. But see, it's 8:15. I'm aware that everybody probably has somewhere else to go. We will sit here for a few minutes afterwards. If somebody would like to ask Michaël a question, maybe you can come up and join us afterwards. A couple of little reminders. This exhibition, as part of our Modern and Contemporary program, a selection of objects from the collection curated by Wes Anderson and his partner Juman Malouf, is running downstairs until the end of April. And in early March, on the 11th of March, we will open the first exhibition in Austria of the paintings of Mark Rothko. It will be around 46 paintings, tracing his entire career from his early figurative work, biblical scenes, still lives, up to, this is a painting from 1957, up to 1969, just before he died. We've worked very closely with his children, Kate and Christopher, who are lending an important nucleus of works from the family's own collection, paintings that Rothko kept in his own collection his whole life. And the next talk will actually be Christopher Rothko, the son, talking on the 18th of March here about his father's work. And it's going to be a very interesting evening, I hope. So I'd like to say thank you to Kat for helping with all the arrangements, to Michael's Galleries for helping with images, to the Hotel Sans Souci, to our wonderful contemporary patrons, to Judith, wherever she is, for helping put slides together, all of my colleagues. And thank you to Michael for a wonderful day and for putting all this fabulous art out into the world. This is art which we need more of. So even when you were saying there's too much crap in the world, I'm happy to say that you can excuse yourself from that dilemma. So thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. The pleasure was all mine, Jasper. It was very nice.